Good evening and welcome to our Sunday evening worship service and a devotional thought. We live in a world that currently and really always has been in problems. It's had its problems. It's at the forefront now because it is far more public. Our lives have problems. Some people's lives seem to have more problems with others, and that's simply because those problems are manifest in more of a public way. Some people are able better to hide their problems, and it seems like that there are those who they simply master in problems. They make the same decisions, and those same decisions bring about the same situation and the same conclusion. And so when we have problems in our lives, how do we face it? Donna can usually tell when I've got some problems because I have a tendency to work at home more. And she'll say, what's the problem? What's going on? What is there that you can't nail down? And so each one of us have a different way of either avoiding, maybe hiding, or dealing with problems. You're always going to have problems. And I believe that the problem that you have now, that you are working through, is going to prepare you better for the ones that are ahead. What helps you now to solve a problem is how you've handled it in your past. And if you're always looking back at the past, if people are always looking at your past, then they're always looking backwards. And God said, I can't do a new thing in your life if you're looking backwards. And so today what I want to simply do is I want to look from the book of Titus. When it comes to Timothy, Timothy seems to have a spirit more of timidity. And yet Titus is one that you would call on if you had a church problem. And Paul did. Paul called on Titus to help solve problems at Corinth. He called on Titus to help solve problems and take the chaos and solve the problems that were at Crete. Paul called upon Titus to solve problems. When it comes to Titus, as he is dealing with one of the problems there, and that is it has to do with the collection of the saints for the poor saints at Jerusalem. It was Titus who goes in and he took the initiative and he was the one who solved the problem. He was the one who negotiated, if you will, the conflict there and was able to work with the church and to achieve peace. Paul trusted him. And if you're going to be a leader that is going to be trusted, you need to learn. I need to learn how to be a problem solver. You know what they say, anytime you sweep something under the rug, eventually it piles up and you fall over it. Let me give you another secret. If you're ever dealing with problems and a person, instead of dealing with that subject, seems to deal with multiple problems, the first problem was never solved. And so when the wall comes down, when his inhibitions are done away with, he kind of scatterguns you. And you've got those that are sharpshooters. They stay on one subject until they resolve the problem. And that describes Titus. If you're ever in a business meeting and someone is they're on every subject, you begin to wonder, what's the problem? And the problem is that they have never nailed down or resolved the first problem. And therefore, they just simply scattergun everything because they're so frustrated. And so, problem solving, talking about dealing with problems, is the fastest way to gain a leadership. Be that leadership in, and I dealt with this subject in a Bible class, and we dealt with leadership as we deal with leadership of yourself. Someone has to lead you. The leadership of children or the family unit, leadership at church. But if you don't lead and you don't take the initiative in your life, someone else will lead you. If you don't lead your family, lead your children, someone else will, and it will not be a pretty sight. The end result will not be pretty. And so here's what we have. We have Titus. Titus, who was a problem solver. And we know that if problems are left alone, things go amiss. When it comes to problems, if we're not careful and we do not solve them, not only will they go amiss, someone will step forward and solve the problem, and it may not be the method that you would use, or it may also lead you astray. And so Titus was a problem solver. Let's read this from the book of Titus. In the book of Titus, chapter 1, we begin reading in verses 10, and we will read through verses 14. For there are many who are insubordinate. They are empty talkers. They are deceivers, especially those of the circumcision party. One of the worst enemies that Christianity had was Judaism. Judaism believed that Christianity was a threat. And so anything they could do to wipe out Christianity, or in many cases they were called people of the way. And I think that came from the expression that Jesus is, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He is not he is the way. He's the only way. Therefore, Christians received this title, people of the way, the way. And so there are those of the circumcision party, the Jewish party, who cause their troubles. They must be silenced, since they are upsetting whole families by the teaching, for shameful gain, what they ought not to teach. One of the Cretan, a prophet of their own, said Cretans are always liars, evil beasts, and lazy gluttons. This was Epimenides in about the year 600 BC. And so they had a reputation. These Cretans had a reputation that at least we know goes back some 600 years. It's kind of a joke between the New Zealanders and the Australians. New Zealand was a free settled country. Australia was settled. It was a penal colony from England, and they would send the criminals there. And there's always been a joke between New Zealand and Australia. It is a friendly rival, but it's still a rival. And so the Australians have had that record for a long, long time. I was that way when I was in Tiptonville. There was a place there that criminals would run to, especially after the Civil War. And they established this town on Tiptonville Lake. So a reputation. And that reputation is hurting the church. And Timothy is charged with solving the problem. This testimony is true. Therefore, rebuke them. Rebuke them sharply, that they may be sound in the faith, not devoting themselves to Jewish myths and the commands of people who turn away from the truth. And here Titus is given the charge to go and to rebuke. The word rebuke there has to do with, we find that all Scripture is given by the inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of God might be perfect, always fully furnished unto every good work. Titus here is given the charge to rebuke them, to let them know what is wrong and how to get right. And so problems that are left alone do not go away. They either build up, they frustrate, they complicate, they mess us up, they cause other things to go awry. And so here's one thing that a man of God can do, a woman of God, a husband, a wife, those that are of a reasoning age. Here's what we can do with our problems. And I want us to consider the characteristics of a good problem solver, because the Bible gives them. Sometimes what we do is we try to ignore. And when we ignore, it just simply fabricates. It gets bigger. Let's resolve it. And if we would spend the energy solving the problem that we do worrying about it, at the end result, you have a conclusion. You have an answer. The problem's solved. But if the way that you deal with problems is worry about them, at the end, you've wasted so much energy. And not only that, you do not have a solution. And so first of all, let me suggest to you that a good problem solver anticipates problems. It's the idea of being proactive or reactive. Someone who's proactive, realizes that there's going to be problems. Sometimes they have the solution. They have a scheme that they can go through. They have steps that they can go through in order to solve those problems. And so Titus, number one, was able to anticipate problems in Corinth. And he prevented the possibility of the church splitting. A second characteristic of a good problem solver is that they accept the truth. Sometimes we've just got to realize the truth. We accept it and we work off of it. We don't complicate it. We don't ignore it. We don't push it to the side. You'll notice one of the characteristics of someone who was always making foolish decisions, getting foolish results, is they have a tendency to blame other people, to circumvent the truth. And so we accept the truth. Titus, when Titus dealt with Paul, Titus was always honest with Paul. He was honest with the troubled churches that he led, and he faced reality. And so we have in the characteristic of a good problem solver is we have that they anticipate the problem. The second characteristic is that they accept the truth. The third characteristic is they see a big picture. They're able to step back and see the big picture. And in so doing, they can evaluate the big problem, who it affects, and then they can get in there and they can come up with the micro decisions that's needed for the group or the bigger picture. They solve it. And so Titus knew. He knew it was dealing with the church at Crete due to the larger perspective. And so Paul trusted Titus to be a problem solver. The fourth thing is that they handle one problem at a time. I was watching a program and it was dealing with a man who had searched for years for a sniper's uniform from the Confederate Army, one of the hardest uniforms to find. Number one, they were usually always the first to be shot. And so he had gone to an auction and he had bought just a box of papers, he thought. And when he finally got the box, in the bottom of it was something that he had hunted for so long. But it was the uniform of a sharpshooter. That sharpshooter knew who he had to kill first. He knew why he had to take that person out. And so the difference between that sharpshooter and someone who just scatterguns in meetings, or maybe talking to you, you ask him a question and he's got 20 things he wants to deal with, and you think, man, we didn't even hit the problem. It is because people who are good problem solvers deal with one problem at a time. And they will keep going back. Let's deal with this. Let's deal with this. Let's deal with this. Men, you know what I'm talking about if you've ever been in a men's business meeting. Sometimes we can never solve anything. They're a waste of time because we never, ever dealt with one problem at a time. The fifth thing, the fifth characteristic in being a good problem solver is that they never, ever give up. They don't give up that major goal when they're down. The Jenkins, Dale and Jeff Jenkins, have written a book, Never Quit on Monday. As they're dealing with preachers, preachers have down days, and Monday for me is a day of evaluation. How did things go Sunday? How did you do Sunday? And sometimes Monday is a down day. And in solving problems, there's going to be down days. But a good problem solver does not give up on that down day when they are down. Titus, man, he tenaciously went in there and he dealt with, he addressed the conflict in Corinth, and he stayed with it until he resolved the problems. I call it being a tick on a dog. You don't get off, you stay there until the work is done. And then finally, I want us to think about our God. It is our God who gives us the strength. He gives us the will. You can read all of the books you want, but unless God is involved, you're not going to be successful. Most of the time you end up manipulating people. And so here's what we do. We anticipate. Good leaders, good problem solvers anticipate problems. They accept the truth. They see the big picture, and they handle one thing at a time, and they do not give up when they're down, when times seem to be a little bit tougher. And so the question that we ask, Mike, when you're facing problems, how do you react? Do you ignore it? Do you hope it will just go away? Do you feel powerless? Do you feel paralyzed? And brethren, through this coronavirus, I trust my God. I trust my God to put things back together. It's amazing to me. And if you're watching, I want you to listen without getting your feelings hurt or things ruffled. But I am amazed that when the gym opens back up. They don't send out letters. They don't tell the people who are coming to the gym, here's what we're going to do. You come between 1 and 3 and this area here is blocked off. I mean, the gym, especially the one between Farmington and Prairie Grove, when they opened their doors, they were flooded. And so the gym can get them back. But Jesus cannot. We read articles, and I've read articles that have come across my screen of how we're going to rebuild. There should be no rebuilding of the church. If we have to rebuild the church, I wonder what sort of disciples that we have to begin with. If you have to tell me and beg me and plead me and give me all these alternatives, then I wonder what sort of disciple I really was. Jesus went to the cross. He never took his eyes off the cross because he wanted to seek and save those that were lost. Now understand, and please understand, that I know, our elders know, that there are people that need to be at home watching and worshiping that way. Brethren, there are so many that are really not affected, that are simply taking time off. I would question myself. I would question myself if I can stay at home and not have within me a desire to be with my brethren. I was talking to a dear friend of mine, an elder of the church, and he's had some problems, health problems, and he said, I'm staying home because of this. He says, but within me there is a longing to be back worshiping with my brethren. And that's the attitude that we ought to have. And so during this coronavirus, and it's not going away quickly, I trust the Lord. I trust the Lord that he'll put back together. And brethren, if the gym can do it, surely Jesus can outdo the gym. I pray every day for the church that we can be the disciples that the Lord meant for us to be. And so, how do you handle the problems, Mike? Do you ignore them? Do you hope they'll go away? You paralyzed by them? Do you have problems with it? The ability to solve problems comes from experience. It comes from experiencing in handling problems in the past, overcoming those obstacles and knowing I'll overcome this one and I'll overcome the one that follows that. And so let me give you a few things that will help us to improve our problem-solving skills. Let me suggest to you, number one, that we actually look for problems. We are proactive. We don't ignore them. We don't avoid problems. We attack them. We look for them. We find them. We identify them. And then we attack them. We use caution. We find them and we take them to an experienced person in that area. And so number one, look for trouble. Let me suggest to you, number two, we need to develop a method. How are we going to solve the problems that face us? Come up with a system. Take time to discover the real issue and then find out what others have done. It's not uncommon when I meet problems that I will call dear friends of mine and I will ask them, have you ever been through? And how did you get through it? How did you solve the problem? And so the second method that I would suggest is that we develop a method. And then finally, surround yourself with people who are problem solvers. Not the old poor pitiful me, not the ones that skirt the issue, not the ones that blame others, but others that can look at it squarely. They find competent ways of dealing with problems. They have competence in areas of resolving and solving problems. We're always going to have problems. I always do anyway. Sometimes I am the fabricator of my own problems, but problems are coming our way. How do we solve them? If you don't solve your problem, someone else will. And it may not be what you like. So learn to solve a problem. Don't run from it. Solve it. Solve it right where you are. And you'll notice that the great giants that we have been talking about in the book of Hebrews chapter 11, God, when they failed, God took them back to where they failed to start again. Read the stories. And if you and I have not tried and failed, and God has picked us up, others have picked us up, and we try again, we will never be successful. But above all, above everything else, I trust my Lord. My Lord is a problem solver. He will solve your problems, and he'll solve my problems if we include him. We appreciate you being with us, and we have enjoyed our time together. I hope it's been helpful, and may God bless you and give you a great week.